Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy podcast. On the cast this week, we've got plenty to talk about. Top players not liking the current format, a couple of new cards revealed, a Regieleki and Regidrago VSTAR. We'll, of course, have everyone's favorite segment, Guess That Flavor Text, and probably the main thing most people this week are listening for. We'll have our Salt Lake City meta predictions discussion, talk about what's going to go down in the Salt Lake City Regional Championships this coming weekend. My name is Trainer Chip Ritchie, and I'm joined here, as always, by my co-host, Azul GG. Azul, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey Chip, how's it going? I'm doing better now. I actually was super sick over the week. Definitely caught the pokey flu in Peoria. Thankfully, it was not COVID, and I'm recovering now. But yeah, I haven't been this sick. I think maybe or felt this sick like since I got COVID a while back. But yeah, recovering, feeling better now. Over the last couple days, so back to it. Unfortunately, I've been kind of on like a content hiatus the last gonna be 4 weeks. I might get one stream in tomorrow or today, I guess, as this is going up before Salt Lake City. But then looking to hit the content grind, like I always say, hard when I get back from Salt Lake City. So I'm looking forward to like streaming and making videos again. It's just, yeah, it was unfortunate. I was looking forward to it when I got back from Peoria, but then got sick. How about you, Chip? How's it been going?
It's been good, man. It's been good. Just had a pretty lax, normal week. My brother, who just moved to where I live, to Raleigh earlier this summer, he's just kind of started picking up an interest in wanting to like start playing Pokemon, which has been kind of cool. So he and I have been the last couple nights getting together, and he's been trying to play some decks. He's bought some cards and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. I kind of threw him into the deep end a little bit, I think, because the decks I had built is I had a Palkia Inteleon deck built, and I had Regigigas, and he played the Palkia deck because he sat there and read through everything. And I realized, like, on his turns, that there's just way too much for someone who barely knows the rules of the game. There's just way too much going on in that deck for someone to just pick it up, and he's like doing all these actions every single turn. But it was really cool because he's like identifying pretty smart lines for the most part. It's like he read through the deck, and then on his first turn, he went second. He played Irida. He's like, well, I'm definitely grabbing this, and slammed the Battle VIP pass down. So he's got the standard format in a nutshell, I think.
Yes, good to go. He's
uh,
already.
but yeah, it's been cool. He's definitely been learning. And also shout outs to Denton as well, because he is actually the person who helped me come up with, whenever Azul and I were coming up with names for the podcast, he was the first person to throw out
Oh
the
yeah.
idea of the name Uncommon Energy. So shout outs to brother Denton on the podcast name and starting to play Pokemon. Could be cool. Maybe we'll see him at a regionals or something later this year.
Yeah, shout out to Denton for sure.
I know you and your brother, you grew up playing Pokemon with your siblings, right? But my brother,
Yeah.
he and I played the game when we were kids. We just had cards and we didn't know the rules. We like made up our own rules and stuff. It was just like slam your Charizard into play. We had like a rule where every energy you attached to it gave it 10 more HP, like just like made up stuff like that. So yeah, it's been cool. He's definitely shown a little interest in it. It would be maybe a little cooler, if we were like, teenagers or something, but we're in our 20s, it's fine, right? But yeah, so before we get into this week's episode and all the topics that we mentioned, there is something a little somber that we do want to talk about and bring attention to, a little bit of a sad situation that's come up in the community. So a group of Pokemon players from West Virginia, on their way home from Peoria Regionals last weekend, they were actually in a bad car accident, hit by a drunk driver in a head-on car accident, and they're all in the hospital. It is definitely a pretty sad and, really unfortunate and sad situation. But some GoFundMe's and stuff have been set up. So we just wanted to spend a little bit of time and just talk about it and mention it, use our platform to kind of provide a place where people could hear about this and maybe some good could come of it. So a couple of things. The first thing I saw about this was actually for an event that's going to be taking place at a card shop in West Virginia this weekend at Four Horsemen Comics. They tweeted out about the event coming up this weekend. So if you're not going to Salt Lake City and you live on the East Coast, this could be a great way to show a little bit of support. They're holding two tournaments, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and then all their single card proceeds are going to go towards the medical expenses of these players. So we wanted to bring attention to that. The players' names as well. Um, we've got brothers Tiger Hickman and Mark Lafferty, and then also their friend Drake Lemansky, all injured, all in the hospital. Tiger seems to be the one from the GoFundMe information who was he was the driver, so he was kind of the worst off. But it seems like everyone is on the road to recovery, but it's kind of just like a long road to recovery. So there's a couple GoFundMe's. We'll have all the links to that down in the description. We've donated some money as the two of us from the podcast that, we wanted to just do a little bit to help where we can. And we would definitely encourage any of our listeners, if they have the means, please show your support to, this is like just such a great time for people from our community to come together and show, the good parts of our community, right? And come together and try to make make light of a very, very sad and bad situation.
Yeah, definitely. It really sucks to hear. Things like this happen all the time in the world. Not always able to help out, but if you are able to help out and donate towards their GoFundMe's, that's great. If not, I mean, we'll have a tweet out at some point, at the very least, or if you want to like that tweet, retweet that tweet with the links to everything, or if you can find any of their original tweets, which we could probably put in the description as well, like and retweet those tweets as well. So if you can't help them out, with any donations, at the very least, if you can give it a like, give it a retweet on the Twitter.
Yeah, definitely. So, and to Drake and Tiger and Mark, we're thinking about you guys, and we wish you the speediest of recoveries. I can't imagine, and to your families as well. Like, I can't imagine the hardship and stuff that's become you guys. And yeah, best of luck. I mean, it's tough, but the Pokemon community is here for you, and we support you, and we just wish you the best in a terrible situation, without a doubt.
Yeah, hopefully a speedy recovery for sure. We're the rest of the community is behind you guys.
Absolutely. But from that, we do have a bunch of stuff to talk about. We'll get into more of the meat of our, what the content is for our episode this week. And starting off this week was a little bit of a discussion I saw on Twitter from a couple of top players. Two of the, I would say, better North American players both put out a little comments, maybe hinting at dislike or distaste of the current format. Drew Kennett, who just got top 4 in Baltimore a few weekends ago. He got top 4 last season and also won a regionals last season. Just tweeted, "The more I play this format, the more it makes me want rotation." Ian Robb, who also won a regionals last season, said, "This format feels very stale very quickly. All the interesting decks in the format get beaten by Drapion V or are the insane prize trade that Sableye and Cram can give a deck." And also, I spoke to Michael Pramawat, another great player, the winningest player in regionals history, who just got top 32 in Peoria. He was on the winning in, lost his winning in match. I was talking to him about it. I was like, "Are you doing Salt Lake?" And he said, "Nope, and I'm ready to be done with this format." So is this just like a thing, or are a lot of the top players really just not enjoying this format right now, Azul?
I mean, I think the format's okay. I think I think that I've seen a little bit of both now. I hadn't seen either of these tweets from Ian or Drew until you brought them up to me. But I've seen a lot of people enjoying the I guess, I don't know, the loss engine in general, and then kind of the diversity of decks. I think one of the things that sometimes gets lost in the discussion of diversity is just if all the decks are super similar or do the same thing, or are all just a bunch of weak decks that have like their it's like if there's a ton of decks and you just beat enough of the other ton of decks, but you never really match up to like the best decks in the format. You'll be able to like have a decent win rate in the format, but the decks aren't ever really actually good, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of what we have going on here. There's just a bunch of mediocre decks, and there's so many of them that it's hard to filter through them and figure out which ones are truly the best of them. And then you have kind of the best overall deck still on top, like Palkia and Teleon still kind of feels like it reigns supreme at the end of the day. So I think the format's okay. I don't think it's like anything that great. Initially, it definitely seemed like there was maybe a lot to work with and a ton going on. But I think the more I've kind of played with the format, it isn't anything super special. And it almost feels like a little bit more prize racy than the last format. I feel like the last format almost had like a little bit more control to it at some points. But this format definitely feels a little bit more prize racy. But I mean, it's still solid. A lot of new stuff, and we're not that far from the new set either, right? It comes out next month on like the 11th, so we're only like a month away from the new set. So we're not too far away. But the new set doesn't look like it has that much going for it either. So I don't know. This might be Vivid Voltage all over again, to be honest.
Yeah, Silver Tempest is looking very, very mediocre. Definitely feeling much more like a collector, holiday set, right? It's coming out right
Yeah.
before Christmas. There's Lugia in the set, Alolan Vulpix, like very popular Pokemon, so that's probably where it's leaning. I don't know. I mean, the format to me has felt fine. I do think obviously Palkia and Tellian, it definitely just far and away still seems like the best deck. The Lost Zone engine is so unique and so different from like any other engine of deck from Pokemon in the past, where you're like trying to just get rid of a bunch of cards, and it's just very, very powerful. It just felt like there was going to be so much you could do with it, and I still think there could be some underexplored aspects of it, maybe some other Lost Zone box type of decks that could be okay. Um, Not relying on Sableye, but maybe more relying on Mirage Gate and a bunch of different types of attackers. But I think that the meta needs to be a little more defined for something like that to really function. Like there needs to be a defined meta for there to be a really cool anti-meta deck, right? And there's just such a wide variety of different decks. But like you said, it feels like so many of the decks, there's a bunch of them, but they do very similar things. You take
Yeah.
Zoroark and Palkia. You've got your V that you're trying to evolve into a VSTAR to just chase down 2 prizes every single turn, right? One of them does it way better than the other one, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got like Arceus Gudra and Arceus Duraludon as these big tanky decks. Both of them, for some reason, people are still playing Duraludon. It feels like Gudra's kind of just the the one that should be taking over. So I don't know. I mean, I think the format is okay, but I think that a false pretense that a lot of people will have is like just because there's a lot of decks, it makes the format good, which is not true, right? Just
Yeah.
because there's a ton of different decks that could be really good doesn't mean that the format is actually, deck diversity does not directly equate to a good format necessarily.
Yeah. But I would definitely say enjoy the variety when we have it, even if the format overall doesn't feel great. Because we could go back to NAIC where it was 3 decks, and that felt
Yes.
like pretty bad overall as a meta goes. Of course, winning it, I did win it, which felt great. But as far as a format goes, I would definitely prefer this to NAIC format for sure.
Agreed.
So there definitely is times where like diversity, despite it not being a great format, is fine. And actually, I think that's maybe the problem with this format. I feel like there's too much diversity. I feel like this, and maybe that has to do with how big regionals are, and maybe the Pokemon, because it's interesting because like Magic tournaments are so much bigger. Like Magic regionals are so much bigger than Pokemon regionals. They get like I think 1,600, 2,000 people. So I'd be curious to see what their meta breakdown looks like. As far as like what percentage of decks are played, because I feel like maybe one of the problems with this format is that the format is not more narrow, so you can't. It's really hard to like meta call in this meta. There's so many decks to account for, and that's why I think stuff like, actually like Paul Canteleon and Giratina kind of reign supreme because they don't really have any terrible matchups, right? So it feels like if the meta was just more narrow, you could make meta calls and the meta could kind of evolve. But instead, it's just like pick your favorite deck and maybe tech for a couple of the matchups that are kind of swinging towards being the most popular, or like the new hype decks. Like Blissey has kind of been like the new hype deck recently. Like, and then it's really hard to like make a good like kind of meta prediction. You kind of just it's just like nothing to predict. It's just like there's so many decks, and maybe it's just because maybe that is just because the Pokemon community is kind of new to the idea of regionals being so big, or maybe it just is kind of like the meta with like there is that many decks that are like decent, right? There's that many decent decks right now, and people are kind of hanging on to playing a more mediocre play just because it is their favorite deck, and instead of trying to play that better play. I don't know. Maybe it is just like there's just that many decks that are just good enough to be played, and people want to play what they want to play, which is reasonable as well, of course. But yeah, the meta does not. I agree. I don't think the meta feels great. It feels. I don't even know how. I'm like saying a bunch of things that I don't think describe my feelings very well. But yeah, the meta doesn't. In the end of the day, the meta doesn't feel great. But I think definitely enjoy the diversity while we have it, because it's definitely worse when there's a lack of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big worry is just that, like you mentioned, that the new set that comes out a month from today when this podcast comes out just doesn't really shake things up, and it doesn't seem like it's going to. We're going to talk about a couple of the cards coming out in this next set here shortly. and they seem very okay. I think Regidrago is probably the best new archetype potentially to come out, and I think it seems very okay. I don't think Lugia seems great. Vulpix doesn't seem great either. Like Vulpix, you can maybe do some stuff with it, but once again, just not great. And we had this situation come up after Darkness Ablaze. There was a pretty big shakeup in the meta. Eternatus was very solid and definitely fit into that tag team meta, pretty nicely, and like became like a solid tier 2 deck, right? Then Vivid Voltage comes out. Colossal's kind of the big new deck, and we've got VMAX Pikachu as well. Neither of these two decks were very good, never really did too much. And after about 2 weeks of the new set being out, people kind of put them to the side, and it was the exact same format. And so we ended up
Yeah.
having, instead of getting a whole new set, bringing a bunch to the format every 3 months, which is, I think, something that keeps the Pokemon TCG very fresh and enjoyable. We had 6 months of the same format. And I'm hoping that we don't experience that through the end of the year, though we are, I think, supposed to get a mini set in January. So through these like 2 month set releases, it feels like maybe it's not going to be quite as bad as it was, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, we'll get that mini set before hopefully we get a big shakeup with like the EXs returning in February, March. I don't even know.
Sometime like that, I
Um,
guess.
yeah, I think maybe one of the like the bigger another thing that like I guess isn't talked about too much with the format in general is kind of like the way that the game feels as far as tempo of the games feel. Like I feel like sometimes we get a new set release when either maybe it's around a specific card. Like a big one I think would have been Reset Stamp. When we got Reset Stamp, I feel like that really shifted up the tempo of the game a little bit and like offered some comeback mechanic. Roxanne didn't really do that quite as much because it's not as splashable of a card as something like an Enter or Reset Stamp.
It
But
pretty much
I
fits
feel
in
like that,
like one engine, right? Like you can pretty much
yeah.
only play Roxanne if you're playing Inteleon already in your deck.
Yeah, I feel like the tempo of the game hasn't switched up in a while because even like you talked about, Pram was like not enjoying the format and the Giratina list he played, like he was on the win in, and the Giratina list he played no hand disruption and no way to remove a stadium. So like
Yeah.
he was hoping that path wouldn't stick, or they wouldn't get a path early, and he was like, well, I just want to be as consistent as I can about taking knockouts with my specific different Pokemon, right? So it's like, yeah, the tempo of the game feels like it's kind of been similar for a while. We are getting some more one prizers, which is nice and obviously shifts some stuff up and makes some other decks have to account for that differently. But yeah, overall, it feels like we've kind of been, and hopefully, and I think we will have to wait until EXs. I think that
Yeah.
is going to be the big shift for the game, or that's what we hope for. Sounds like that's what they want to do, and well, hopefully they pull it off, right? So they will
Yeah.
have to just kind of hold out for 4 more months of maybe the same format, but just
Well, but
hold
then
out.
the issue becomes we're gonna get these new
EXs are coming.
EXs, and it's like, are they even gonna be that good right away because the V
That's
stars still
true.
exist? It's almost like, for the game, it takes a long time
Might take
in
two rotations.
a rotation like this to get like the rotation format that they have set in place. It takes a long time to get to the point of, implementing new strategies or like new overall core game
Ideas and
ideas, yeah, game theories, right?
yeah,
Because you've got the old ideas that were not good still stuck in the game
yeah,
for a little while.
shady dealings.
Yeah, which should be rotating at the start of the year, so we'll see how that mixes things up. It's just going to be Palkia Bibarel will be the number one deck probably.
Let's go.
Tord was ahead of the game whenever he played Palkia Bibarel in
He just
Baltimore.
played a bad Palkia deck just to see how good it would
He's
still
just
be.
getting ready for the future, man. He's playing
Yeah, dude,
post rotation.
testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's testing for the new format already. One step ahead.
Well, moving on from that,
Um,
we will talk about, unless do you have anything else to say?
no, I was gonna say let's get into some of these cards. Let's get into them. Go ahead.
Yeah, so new cards. These actually the translations came out the night before Salt Lake City, so we're a little behind, I guess, in talking about the new Regieleki VMAX or V-Star and the Regidrago V-Star. But they
I was
will
gonna
be.
mention I couldn't find I also want to kind of mention the Lugia, but I can't find a translation for it.
Did we talk about
On
the Lugia when it came out?
Did we?
I thought
Did
we
we mention
did.
the Lugia? We maybe did. You might be right. I
I
don't
think we
remember.
did.
Okay. Well, the Lugia is cool too. I think that's also a pretty cool one.
Think it's
Just know
okay.
that. Yeah. All right. Drago and Lecky. Let's get into him. Go ahead.
Yeah. So these translations, as always, coming from Tuan Lei, who is our go-to translator over on Twitter. We'll start with the Regieleki, starting with the V here. It's got the Switch Bolt attack for a lightning. It deals 30 damage. Switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. pretty decent attack on an evolving basic. The same attack pretty much as Hisuian Zoroark V-Star, or Hisuian Zoroark V, though this does require an energy. Zoroarks can be used for free. And it's got the Lightning Wall attack as well for a Lightning and 2 colorless, 100 damage. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 100 less damage from attacks. Also an okay attack, not amazing. The Regieleki VMAX has the ability Transistor. Your Lightning type basic Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And it doesn't say you can only use one Transistor ability, so it does theoretically stack. And then the Max Rumbling attack for a Lightning and 2 colorless deals 220 damage, and this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. Also, I said it was a V-Star. It is actually a VMAX.
Yeah, VMAX. It has free retreat too. With finally a Lecky with free retreat.
Yes, the fastest Pokemon in the video games.
Yeah.
Always has 2 retreat, 3 retreat for some reason. We finally get
Reggie
one with
players.
3 retreat. Yeah.
Reggie players are so mad right now. Myself included. Like, why? Lecky having free retreat in the Reggie deck would be just so sick. It'd be insane. But yeah, instead it has 2 retreat. And bad Lecky has 3 retreats, so you know why it's bad. But this one's interesting. The ability just doing 30 to your basic Pokemon do 30 more to your opponent's active. It feels like it's built for Vikavolt. Like, what else would you even play this with, right?
Hit and run more Pekko, bro. More Pekko.
And then it feels bad because its attack is also only 220 damage for a Lightning double colorless. Like, that just feels so low. It feels like this is like you could only play this with Vikavolt. Maybe someone else has come up with something else, but I feel like you're only playing this thing with Vikavolt. Maybe some kind of Flaffy box. But I don't know which basic Lightning, like one prize Pokemon is dying for plus 30 damage to put a VMAX on your bench. So doesn't seem great. I don't know. Have you had any more an epiphany with this card yet? Have you broken it?
But maybe it'll happen at some point. Probably not. Yeah, I mean, this card just seems very okay. It's awkward that the ability doesn't boost itself. Its own damage output. I feel like they could have made it boost its own damage output and then, just decrease the amount of damage that its attack does. Though maybe there's some other Lightning Pokemon out there that's a V-Star or a VMAX that they didn't want to boost too much. Like, I don't know. Who knows? Lightning is always one of the stronger types. There is a ton of Lightning support. Obviously, Speed Lightning Energy, one of the best energy cards in the game.
Flaffy.
You've got Flaffy as Dynamotor. There's even other cards in the format that I think people forget about as well, like the Electrode that can blow up and put energies on your guys. Like, there's just so many different, even though that card's not great, obviously, there's just so many different things that support Lightning Pokemon in the format that it's always, worth looking at and thinking about whenever a good Lightning or a new Lightning Pokemon comes out. But yeah, this one just doesn't feel like amazing.
Yeah, it does not seem great, but one that actually might be pretty. I don't know. Chip seemed less enthusiastic about this, but Chip was hyping up Hisuian Zoroark, so that's got to mean something good for the Regidrago V-Star. The V has a celestial.
Zoroark got top 8, bro. Come on, that's
it did get top 8.
Continue on, sir.
Regidrago V Celestial Roar for a colorless. Discard the top 3 cards of your deck. Attach any energy you discard this way to this Pokemon. We used to have that on Rayquaza V, I think. Rayquaza V had that. No, Rayquaza EX.
Yes.
And then it's got Grass colorless for the Dragon Laser 130 and does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So nothing great. You probably just like Rayquaza EX, you probably won't be using Celestial Roar on this card either. You never really want to use that on Rayquaza. Sometimes you'd risk it if you had like a really slow start, but it's really all about the V-Star for Grass colorless. It's got 200 HP. Grass colorless. Iconic Visions, I think I got that right. Choose an attack from a dragon type Pokemon in your discard and use it as this attack. So Grass colorless or Grass Fire. Did I say colorless? I think I said colorless. Grass Fire.
Yeah, Grass Fire.
Yeah, Grass Fire. I think Gardenia finally. And this is kind of a little bit reminiscent of Mewtwo, Welder Mewtwo. You weld it to your Mewtwo. You use a bunch of attacks from your discard pile from your GX Pokemon. Now we got this V-Star Regidrago. You're going to probably Gardenia to it to set it up to attack with Grass Fire. How else are you getting to that energy count? Gardenia has been waiting for this thing to release, and then you copy any dragon attack from your discard pile. So not any V attack, but any dragon's attack. And then it has the ability Star Legacy. You may use this ability once a your turn. Discard the top 7 cards of your deck, and then put 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand. So not from those 7 cards, just anything from your discard pile into your hand. So pretty strong, aggressive ability.
It is the V-Star power, so you only get to use
the V-Star
one per game. But yeah, I mean, definitely a very solid.
I don't even think want to use that. Like if you could want to use that twice, like it's a very aggressive. Any two cards is good, but discarding 7 cards is a lot. So very aggressive ability. But I think this one's got some potential. I don't know. I'd have to read all the Dragon Pokemon, but you weren't as hype on it, were you, Chip?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's very high maintenance, like comparatively to Mewtwo. Mewtwo's a basic. That's kind of just the biggest thing. You also had
Yeah,
Viridian as a very easy way to go search out your energy and also discard your Pokemon. We've got
Reinhardt.
Training Court, which is okay. But I mean, I do think that this card is decent. I think obviously it's made good by the other dragon Pokemon in the format. So I mean, I've seen people talk about Flygon, a V, as a way to just one hit KO Pokemon. VMAX, do 160 plus 160.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I forgot about that one.
Garchomp V as well is a good attack, right? For because its attack Sonic Strike for a water, 2 fighting, and a colorless. Discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 220 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Like that's an attack cost you're never
It-
gonna power up, but you could power up Regidrago much more reasonably.
yeah, this
Especially
is
with
looking
the
a lot more
remedial.
similar to. This is looking a lot more similar to Mewtwo, and there's also the. I think there's a Dragonite that accelerates 3 energy from your deck.
Yes.
So like Turbo Strike, but the Turbo Strike's a little bit better because it comes from the discard pile. But you got Naganadel as the the Garchomp. You got Makarga or the Flare Blitz is the other one you just mentioned, and now you got and there's like the Dragonite. I think the Stage 2 Dragonite excels 3 energy from your deck to your
Oh
Pokemon in
yes.
play. So this is pretty close. It's pretty close.
Oh yeah,
Well,
Dragonite in the new set. Yeah, I couldn't find it on PKMN cards because it's not out
yeah,
yet. But
it's
yes.
actually funny to think about. Like we always bring up power creep, but this is definitely a worse Mewtwo deck. It's not as good as Mewtwo, but it might be good enough in this format, to be honest.
It's almost like a balancing, right? Like it's like this is similar to Mewtwo, but they've made it Mewtwo was like pretty top tier, right? It's like they
Yeah.
want to they were like, okay, the Mewtwo deck was good. Let's give them worse Mewtwo so it can be a fun little tier 3 deck. That's kind of what I feel like this
Whoa!
is.
I think it could be. I think this might be competitive, Joe. I think you're hated. You also have Gudra for a tank attack, hit for
True.
200,
As another option.
reduce the damage. It'll be fun for sure. That's for sure. It'll definitely be fun. A decent amount of options. It seems like. I don't know if we get anything. We don't know if we get fully in the new set, so there might be some. And there's like probably some stage 1, stage 2 dragons out there that people might not have looked over yet, and just might have some cool interactions as well for like certain matchups or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's plenty of dragon cards to look at from. I mean, Giratina V-Star as well. Can't forget that.
Yeah, of course.
That's an option. And
Wait.
I guess you could use a V-Star power attack as well for the attack. It would have to be your V-Star power for game, right? So
Yeah,
like
I
you
don't think you're
could you
lost owning 10 cards and then discarding your top 7.
good point. Never mind.
Oh no, you wouldn't use that. I guess I guess you wouldn't use that. So no, yeah, it'd have to be a lost zone engine then at that point.
Yeah.
And gates are pretty good. Gates with Garchomp, 220 to the snipe on the bench. Actually that attack is really scary. Like imagine
Yes.
you
Garchomp
go
is solid.
first, you attach and your opponent goes second, attaches to their Arceus on their bench and passes, and you just do 220 to it on the next turn.
I mean, there's the
Um,
Dragonite V as well, which just does 250 damage for water lightning, like 250 plus a choice belt.
yeah, that's actually gets to the 280. That might be a little bit cleaner than the Tina.
And you could build up to Rayquaza. I guess you're not really getting that many fire energies on this thing, so I don't know.
Is there any like weird stage 1s right now, kind of like Cricketune that just like boost dragon stats? Do we have any of those right now? The damage or the
Unless
HP or
something's coming
anything?
out in the next set, no,
Okay.
no. Like,
Well, I'm
yeah,
hyped for the Drago for sure. It'll be cool. Yeah, it might fall to tier 3, but I have a little bit more hope for it, I think, overall. I mean, just having that many options is always like such a big deal. That's one of the things that made Mewtwo so good is it had so many options, right?
ooh, Rapid Strike Zygarde from Evolving Skies. It's like just a regular Zygarde. Judgment Surge. This attack does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each prize card your opponent has taken.
That's not bad. Oh yeah, I actually played that in a Cherum deck at some point. I forget which one it was, but
Oh, good old Cherum. Yeah,
it
yeah,
did
that's
be
what you need to
sniping.
do is you need to think back to all the random bad dragons that you played with the Regidrago in your Cherum deck and
Yeah.
bust them out for this. But yeah, I mean, definitely seems interesting, and these are cards that will be coming out in Silver Tempest, I'm pretty sure, because they are featured on the pack art, so they should be coming out in Silver Tempest, so we'll get to mess around with them, and maybe it'll shake up the meta. Who knows? Maybe it'll be Vivid
I
Voltage
hope
all over
so.
again.
It's looking like Vivid Voltage. But yeah, I think at least maybe we'll get the Regidrago. Did we get anything from Vivid Voltage? Like people tried to force Colossal hard.
The
Um,
best card in Vivid Voltage just started being played with this new set. Can you get what it is? This is like
I
mini
said it.
guess that flavor text.
With the new set,
Yeah.
so it was played in a deck at Peoria
Yes.
as like a primary attacker.
It's not a Pokemon.
Oh my, I have no clue then. What is it?
Wash Energy.
The best card from Vivid Voltage. Now I like want to look up like a set list and actually look at a Vivid Voltage set list.
That's maybe for another time, but
Yeah, that's like yeah, that actually might be it to be honest. Yeah, and people tried to force Colossal. That's like the only thing I can really remember is like people really tried to make Colossal work, but
also the what's it called from last week? Um the Mighty and or Poochie or whatever from 2 weeks ago that you got me with was from Vivid Voltage on Guess the
no,
Flavor
it was.
Text.
That's true.
I guess
That's
the best
true.
card maybe would actually be Leon is probably the best card from the set.
Okay. Yeah, there you
And
go.
there's a couple
Oh,
other decent ones that have
Easy Way
been
Jirachi.
played. Telescopic Sight has been played, right?
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it's a pretty. I mean, as far as like new archetypes, there's nothing in Vivid Voltage.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing quite was ever to come. Yeah, a couple cool tech cards. It was like a tech set. We got Snorlax. All right, Snorlax was the best card from Gourmandized
Okay, sure,
Snorlax.
sure, sure,
We
sure.
got him. But yeah, nothing like I guess like control decks were built around Gourmandized. But yeah, nothing really huge and groundbreaking. So hopefully this is not a repeat of Vivid Voltage, but it definitely looks like one for sure. Besides these, like there's the Lugia, like we mentioned, but none of those seem like they like none of them, especially like the Lugia, doesn't seem like it like outpaces Palkia by any means. And that's kind of like the standard for hit hard multiple turns in a row decks is like if you have some way to like cheese out Palkia or keep up with Palkia, then you're good. But if you don't, then you may as well just play Palkia, right? So
Yeah.
hopefully, but we don't have the full set list yet. So
But we will be talking about it on the podcast once the set list comes out. We'll, of course, also be talking about it as we start testing for it and playing the new set. Silver Tempest will be legal for LAIC, which is we'll be attending. So I'm sure he'll be doing plenty of testing around it. So we'll get some good thoughts on what is good, what is not, and why he's probably just going to play Palkia. No, I'm just kidding. Azul, I don't think is actually. You have not
I
played
not
Palkia to a tournament, right? Like,
gotten close a couple times, but never actually committed to it. Although I would definitely feel like I'd be more comfortable wanting to play it in the current landscape of the meta for sure. But yeah, that's gonna do it. We'll talk about Silver Tempest again in the future. Let's move on to guess that flavor text. It is my turn this week to pick a flavor text for Pokemon to try for Chip to try and guess the Pokemon that goes with that flavor text. As always, if Chip guesses it without using any lifelines, gets 4 points for each lifeline used, minus 1 point. And the 3 lifelines are what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and read an attack name from the card. Chip, are you ready for the flavor text?
I'm so ready. Big points this week, baby. I'm feeling it.
All right. Even if one of its arms is eaten, it's fine. The Pokemon regenerates quickly and will go right back to normal.
Okay. I'm thinking of like squid or octopus type Pokemon because that's like in real life. What would happen? So like Tentacruel, Shuckle, maybe, probably not Shuckle. Shuckle's like a bug and rock type, so that's not it.
Bug. That's a turtle.
Yeah, no, Shuckle is a bug type Pokemon, bro.
Really?
Yes, that's why. Why did you think Shuckle was grass type in the TCG?
Because it's a turtle. Like that's
So
reasonable.
it's a grass type.
Turtwig is.
Yeah, but it's I don't know. It's a bug, which doesn't make any sense to be fair.
Turtwig a bug type?
What else? Malamar or Inkay potentially could be a squid Pokemon that this could fit. I do think I will probably have to use some lifelines here. I'm gonna start with what set the card is from.
I just have to look. Let me just confirm. I just looked this up because I wasn't sure. Let me just take 1 second here and make sure I get the set right.
Yep. Don't want to give any false information.
All I have is the symbol. Yeah, it is Legendary Treasures.
Okay, so no Malamar didn't exist yet.
And I was given this flavor text by a friend and a fan of the podcast. So
read it to
I
me
had a
one
little
more
help
time.
coming up with this one. Even if one of its arms is eaten, it's fine. The Pokemon regenerates quickly and will go right back to normal. And yeah, Legendary Treasures is the set.
I don't think so. That's a reprint set. There definitely was not like a good Tentacool or Tentacruel at any point through. Is there one in the Radiant collection though? Part of me wants to think there is a Tentacruel in the Radiant collection of Legendary Treasures. Okay, I'm gonna need some more help here though. Let's do what stage the card is.
It is stage 1.
Tentacruel seeming like it. All right, let's do read an attack name.
Bind down.
Bind down.
Yeah.
Okay, it's definitely Tentacruel. I'm locking it in. Tentacruel.
No.
Come on, bro.
It
knows
is!
bind. That Pokemon knows bind in the video games.
It is Tangrowth.
Tangrowth.
Yeah, so if you eat a Tangrowth's arm, it will regenerate it. It's literally an infinite food supply right there. Get yourself a Tangrowth.
I don't think there's a Tentacruel in Legendary
I don't think
Treasures
so either. I mean, who would know that? Why would you know if there's a Tangrowth?
Bro, who would know that there's a Tangrowth in Legendary Treasures?
Yeah, so the other attack name is Flog. So I was gonna go with Flog until you were on the Tentacool Tentagrowth train,
you
and then I was
baited
like,
me with the bind.
And I was like, I don't know, Squid's bind down. I was like, all right, I'll give him the bind down instead. I was gonna go with the Flog. I don't know, where would you have gone if I had said Flog though? Would you have still stuck it out?
I don't know. That's a great question.
Where do you go? Where do you go when you hear Flog?
There was no Tentacruel. There was no Tentacruel printed at all during the Black-White era. That's kind of crazy.
That is not really. No one likes that Pokemon.
Bro, Tentacruel's sick.
Flog sounds such an old timey word. Like I feel like that's not a word anymore. Like no one says flog, right? That's not like a thing.
Yeah, I don't think so. Flog. Yeah,
That's
I don't know.
A word from the past.
I did not get it right this week. Let us know if you were able to guess Tangrowth correctly this week. Down in the comments of the YouTube video. I think Azul and I still remain tied at like 4 points apiece or something pitiful. Yeah. So, this is episode 30, by the way, Azul. Episode 30.
30. My gosh. So many potential for so many points. I guess we didn't start doing the 4-point thing to a little ways in, but
it was like episode 10, bro. It's been a while.
Yeah. That's bad to be. I guess
I think we had to start doing the point thing as well because we got to episode 10 and neither of us had any points.
Yeah, so we had to be like, all right, we got to make it easier. We got to like some hints, but I think that does make it more entertaining. That's more enjoyable for sure. But yeah, we're definitely struggling. I guess eventually we'd run out of Pokemon. I don't know. What do you think will happen? We'll end the podcast or we'll run out of Pokemon first?
But see, some Pokemon have multiple flavor texts.
Yeah. Well, I guess run out of flavor text.
Also, there's just no way that we're ever going to do, like, by the time, there's like 900 something Pokemon that exist. Do you know how long, like, what is 900? 900 divided by 52 is 17 years of the podcast.
Well, some of them are like unusable. Like I looked at Zapdos once. First off, every Zapdos has the exact same flavor text, I think. And then it just like you would just give it away immediately. Like some of them are like unusable. Like not because like even if it has the Pokemon's name in it, we'll just kind of blank that out when we read it. But like just reading, it doesn't even have Zapdos in the what's it called, but it just gives it away immediately. I think it's Zapdos.
This Pokemon has complete control over electricity. There are tales of blank nesting in the dark depths of pitch black thunderclouds.
Oh no, it wasn't Zapdos then. It was like even more of a giveaway. I don't know which one it was now, but
it was Zapdos. So maybe.
It was one of the legendary. Oh, maybe it is an older one.
A legendary Pokemon that is said to live in thunderclouds. It freely controls lightning bolts.
Yep, that's it. That's the one.
That's probably Zapdos.
Yeah. Take a guess.
Well, I think that we'll move on from guess that flavor text. Let us know if you're better than us. You definitely are because we're terrible at this. And we'll move on to our Salt Lake City Meta Discussion, talk, forecast, whatever you want to call it. And Salt Lake City Regionals is this coming weekend. It's going to be the exact same format as the tournament from just a couple weeks ago. Also, Lille Regionals, I think, is the next weekend after that in France. So definitely plenty to discuss.
Yeah, actually, that's like
lots of different decks like we mentioned earlier. But go ahead.
I'm actually kind of excited to see what comes out of Lille because like that's like a whole nother part. They haven't had any tournaments in this format, right?
No.
There's so many great players and stuff over there that just haven't been able to used their Poke Brains to like come up with stuff yet. So who knows? There could be a lot of cool stuff that is out there. Hopefully, I'm hoping because if this format's going to be 4 months long, 4 months longer, 5 months longer, I'm hoping for some new stuff to work with. So, yeah, we'll see. I'm very excited. Actually, I didn't even like think about that. That there is one more tournament
Yeah.
in this format. So that's actually I'm kind of excited for that now. I didn't even think about it. But yeah.
And also Warsaw regionals in Poland will also be in this format because it'll be the weekend after Silver Tempest comes out, but it won't be legal for
Oh,
tournaments.
okay, okay. So yeah, I've got a couple over there. All right, cool, cool. That's definitely cool. But yeah, let's start off with the. I mean, I guess the big thing with Lost Origins, right? Lost Zone decks. Do you have a favorite of the Lost Zone decks, Chip?
I
Kind of
think
got three, right?
yeah. Well, so there's like the Sableye deck, obviously that Tord won with, and then there's Giratina. But one I've really kind of been enjoying recently that I've played a little bit is the Mirage Gate without Giratina build. That utilizes some other tech attackers like Regigigas. It's heavy on the Snorlax. And I think quietly Snorlax is becoming one of the like better cards from the set almost it feels like in those decks that can support it. I think you obviously have to support it with Mirage Gate.
Yeah.
Um, but Snorlax is just so good, especially against the deck that just won the last regionals. Like, if you just turn one, go first. I think usually you want to choose to go second if you know you're playing against a Lost Box deck in the mirror. But, say your opponent goes second, choose to go second. You just attach an energy to Snorlax. Next turn, that thing's doing 180, and they can't really deal with it. They can do 110 to it with Cramorant. They can't do anything to it with Sableye. So, I mean, Snorlax is, I think, just kind of quickly becoming very, very solid.
Yeah, Snorlax is actually like it's actually kind of crazy. Yeah, and I actually um bringing up Pram again. Pram's list had the double Snorlax in there for that
Yes.
matchup to be able to set up the double Snorlax board state at some point, or like two Snorlaxes and other things that can't be KO'd by Sableye, like the Greninja if they don't play the Goon or can't find the Goon or whatever.
Yep.
So you could set up that awkward board state for the Sablezard deck to deal with. But yeah, it's so weird. The card is so bad, but it's like so good, you know. It like combos really nicely with Cram because it feels really bad when you like hit a V or a V star with Cram. You're like, haha, like that damage is irrelevant. But then like Snorlax like kind of helps put it all together, right? So you're not
Also,
three hit KOing a Palkia.
Snorlax Belt Goon, that's 220 damage.
That is 220
If
damage. But
you,
you have to
if
be
you,
playing belt.
yeah, yeah. But I think, like, if you're playing, like, a Mirage Gate, if you're playing the
Yeah.
Mirage Gate box version of the deck with the heavy twin energies with the Regigigas, which I think won, like, one of the late night tournaments recently, this version of the
Yeah.
deck that I'm talking about. You're playing Choice Belt anyway. If you just go first against any V or V Star deck, it's not unreasonable to, with all your comfy digs, to go Boss's Orders KO on turn two and take two prizes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not impossible. Yeah. Jeremy Gibson won with a
I'm gonna pull it
well,
up.
I usually call them just like Lost Gate decks. The one with the Lost
Lost
Gate with the
Gate, yeah.
Gigas and had Radiant Zard over Greninja, which is interesting to see usually you got the Greninja in here for some kind of draw power. So I feel like overall I would definitely say I feel like this list is probably lacking a little bit on the draw power, but if it's enough to get there, get your attacker set up, and that's all you really need, right? So yeah, it's got the Gigas, some Snorlax, the SQ in there, and I think they did play against a Blissey in the finals, so the SQ probably came in pretty handy in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. They actually lost to a Blissey, it looks like, in Swiss as well. But they played what, one, two, three, four, five, four Blissey throughout the tournament. Went 3-1 versus
Sheesh,
it.
farming the Blissey.
Let's see, did the one they lose to, did it play Tornadus? Nope, no Tornadus. They must have prized SQ.
Ice
It's
SQ.
IceQ.
Ice Cream.
Must have prized it that
Worship.
game.
Yeah. And Jeremy Gibson actually just like kind of a shout to them, pretty big, I feel like, innovator in Pokemon as of late. They were also like one of the first people to play Radiant Charizard and Teleon with the 4 cross switchers. They were playing that before Worlds for quite a while. So yeah, just shout out to Jeremy.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like the Lost Zone
Yeah.
engine. There's just like so many different things you can do with it. Like we've got this with the Snorlax, the Cramorant, and this is probably still like going to be the best way. I do think Radiant Zard is pretty good in this version of the deck as well, though, just because just having something that can do a lot of damage in the late game is solid. I mean, especially against any of the V-Star Pokemon or whatever. Being able to do 280 with Choice Belt for 1 energy, very solid. So
And this
Greninja's
actually this
consistency is pretty strong, obviously, and Greninja plus Mirage Gate plays are pretty wild, but
Yeah, this list can like combustion blast 4 turns in a row with
Yeah.
double rod, Clara, Raihan, Magma base. You can literally like your opponent draws 2 prize cards, and you're just like combustion blast, combustion blast, combustion blast. Like you could Sableye once, set all the V Pokemon up, and then just blast till the end of the game.
So
Didn't
this
even
is
realize there was 2 ordinary rods.
this is my favorite way to play Lost Box right now, or the Lost Zone engine.
Yeah.
I've changed up this list a bit. Like, I mean, I don't think Rose Tower makes much sense in this deck, to be honest. I don't see how you're ever getting your hand down low enough to really utilize it. I do think the Magma Basin is actually pretty good. You want some sort of counter stadium, and it's just a way to get an extra energy in play. Um, I've messed around with a couple things. I've put a bunch of other different energies in here with Amazing Rare Evil Tall to answer Gudra. One of my students was playing this deck, and he was playing it with just Miltank, just one Miltank to beat Gudra, which just kind of becomes like a stalling war. It's kind of silly how
Don't
if
look at each
Gudra
other.
doesn't play an answer, it's just kind of, well, here we are.
Yeah, who has less cards in their deck at that point? I mean, I
Right.
feel like if you could just Charizard that many turns in a row, though, that might just be your answer to Gudra. Just like Charizard 4 times in a row, or play
Yeah,
for that.
just do
Hope
that
it
much
happens.
damage as much as possible, but.
Yeah.
But yeah, what about you, Azul? Lost Box decks or Lost Zone engine decks? Which one are you kind of leaning towards personally?
So I do think Sablezard is the most powerful deck in the format, if that makes sense. But it's not the best overall deck because I feel like it does have it's much more counterable. So I feel like it is the most powerful deck in the format, but not to the point that it's not the next Mew, it's not the next Palkia, right? Which is I think everyone is thankful of that. We don't need another ridiculous deck in the format. The Lost Gate is the most versatile, and then I think you have Tina, which I think like for me, I feel like Palkia and Teleon is what I consider to be the best deck in the format, but because it's like so versatile and can't be countered, Tina can be a little bit more countered. Um, and I feel like Tina, kind of similar to Palkia and Teleon, doesn't really have a bad matchup. And you do have a decent amount of room to kind of switch up the list for certain matchups. And unlike Palkia, can handle some more of the fringe matchups better, stuff like Blissey, stuff like Duraludon, Arceus. So I feel like if you don't think people are going to be playing counters, you play Sablezard. And if not, then you go with Tina if you want to be able to beat everything, or if you play the Mirage Gate build if you're trying to beat certain things. If you're trying to like pick on certain decks in the format and like add certain tech cards for certain situations, then you play the Mirage Gate build. So it kind of comes down to what you want to do. If you just want to play the best deck and hope they're not teching for it, you play the Sablezard. If you want to be able to beat everything, you play Tina. And if you want to be able to tech for certain matchups and kind of prioritize what you want to beat, then you play the Mirage Gate build.
So I'll ask this as well. Which in Peoria, looking at the meta analysis, Comfy Giratina was the second most played deck,
Yep.
and Comfy Sableye Radiant Charizard was the fifth most played deck. Would you expect that to be similar, or will Towards Win in Peoria propel people to lean more towards the Comfy Sableye Radiant Zard?
So that's actually I had like a lot of people ask me that question, like what I think the meta is going to look like, and I actually think for some reason I actually have like come up with like a like a definition for this. It's like there is certain decks in Pokemon that people are intimidated by, and that's why those decks are not played heavily, even when they're tier 1 or like really good slash broken decks. I think a good example of that is like Mewtwo V Union. Is like that is an intimidating deck to want to pick up and actually play. And I didn't think this myself personally. This was kind of made me come up with this like theory behind intimidating decks. But I think people look at Sablezard as an intimidating deck to pick up and play.
It's tough.
Um,
It's kind of hard. It's pretty hard to play.
I don't think it's as hard as something like a Mewtwo V Union though, or like control
Sure.
decks in the past, where it's like, oh, this is definitely a tier 1 control deck. I don't want to pick that up and try and learn how to play that, right? So I think people are. It's like kind
But
of
you just have
being
to make so many tough decisions with that deck every single game. Like, it definitely
That's
is a high strain on your brain power, I feel like.
I guess so. I feel like when I've ran through it a couple times, like some of the things just become once you do your first search for the turn and know your prize cards, something like you create a priority list, right? And when you see Clara plus Psychic Energy, depending on how many Psychic Energy are in the Lost Zone or in the prize cards, you pick one over the other, right? Like there's just like a priority list in the early game, and then as you get towards the mid game, late game, you just know what you need to have to win the game at that point. So I mean, maybe it's just I've been playing the game a lot longer than people, obviously, so I have that experience with me. But I definitely think it's like it feels like it shouldn't be that kind of an intimidating deck to want to pick up and play, but it does feel like it falls into that. So I actually don't think it's going to be super popular. I think the Mirage Gate decks will see an uptick in play, and I don't think there's even a number. Is there a number for how many Mirage Gate decks were played at like non-Tina Mirage Gate? Was at Peoria?
I
I
don't
didn't
think
find one when I
so.
looked at it,
No.
so I don't even know where that falls. Because I'm pretty sure Sablezard,
It
the
would
number you saw there
probably,
is just Sablezard.
yeah, I don't see anything like that. Um,
I think Tina will be like top
oh,
three
there is
most played
other
again.
comfy slash Kramer ants, which would
Okay.
maybe fall under there, and that was 19 players out of 1,084.
Only yeah, so only that's pretty small. That can't be right then. I feel like that's too small. That was more Mirage Gate than that, I think, at the tournament.
I
But
think
it seems
most
like
of
a
it
lot of
was
people.
just in Giratina.
Yeah, as I was gonna say, a lot of people did end up on Tina as their lost zone
Yeah.
deck of choice, which I think will maintain. And like I said, it
So
kind of makes sense
you
because
still think Giratina will be relatively popular?
yeah, it'll probably be in the top three because it can kind of beat anything, which is like a pretty good draw to want to play a deck, right?
Sure.
I don't think that's always the correct approach to take, but in this wide open of a meta, being able to beat anything seems pretty good. I don't know. So, yeah, I think it'll probably be top three most played. So, I bet those are kind of my like. I don't really have a favorite. That's just how I look at each of them individually, and I don't think you should really be looking at Sablezard as that intimidating of a deck to play. Pick it up, try it out. If you really can't get the hang of it, before Salt Lake City or whatever tournament you're going to go to, put it back down. But definitely give it a try. Don't look at it and not give it that shot.
So is Palkia Intellion the clear BDIF? There were 3 in top 8 of the last regionals. It was the 4th most played deck at Peoria, but very highly performed, obviously getting second
Yeah.
place. And Cal did dead draw in the finals pretty much in both games. He got donked in game 2, and he barely set up in game 1, and still had a path to win in game 1 as well, by the way,
Yeah.
without ever putting a Sobble in play.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. Like, I think, like I said, I think Sablezard is the most powerful deck, but has its counters. Whereas I think Palkia Inteleon literally does not have any counters. And the one counter it did have in Arceus Pikachu is like unplayable with how wide open this meta is. Right? I don't think you can really bring like Arceus Flying Pikachu to a tournament right now. So unless you come up with something else, there's just no real easy way to hard counter Palkia Inteleon. Whereas like you can like there are like ways you can learn to play the matchup against Sablezard or just like tech your deck out the double Snorlax stuff and Lost Box decks and stuff like that, where you can gain an edge against Sablezard, where you can't really gain that edge against Palkia and Teleon. So I think it is pretty clearly still the best deck in format, and I don't think that's going to change until rotation. Probably, I don't know.
Yeah, Intellion is just so good. The fact that Irida, like, you just have access to. I mean, I know it's a huge meme now, but like with Irida and the Intellion engine, you can do literally anything. It feels like you just get so much setup. You have access to everything, whatever. I mean, there's really never been an engine like this in the Pokemon TCG where it's like just by playing your cards normally, you can have access to your entire 60 card deck.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So I think one of the biggest surprises for both of us, I think, at Peoria was how popular Kyurem was. And there was 2 in top 4 to its credit. And now that definitely is could have been a product of its popularity, right? Because that just kind of is. If the tournament is 50% of a deck, the chance for that deck to win or top 8 is much higher because the chance for someone to run ridiculously hot is that much higher, right? But the deck seems still like it's pretty solid. It's been doing still pretty well in online tournaments. I don't think it'll be the most popular deck again, but what do you think, Chip? You think it's going to reign supreme again as the number one most played deck in
I
Salt Lake?
I think people just really like this deck, and it really like the ceiling for like what you can do with this deck is really high. You can not the skill ceiling, I should say, but like the like damage output. Like you can KO anything, and it has its problems. Roxanne plus Path is pretty bad for the deck. So having a tough matchup to the best deck in the format in the Palkia Intellion is not a great prospect, I would say. But I mean, you've got the answers for everything. You've got the Wash Energy so that you can't get Star Requiemed by Giratina, and also you can't have damage placed on you by Sableye. You have a high amount of HP. The Regigigas matchup is probably the one issue for it right now. Is like, I mean, that's a pretty tough matchup. Maybe you can find a way to tech for that. I mean, I don't know if it's hard to slot something like Avery into this deck because you need to play Melanie pretty much every single turn. It feels like, or Irida.
I mean, you do have the Empoleon still and a pretty high stadium
Right.
count. So you have like outs to Path. Like Empoleon's always going to be a trouble for Reggie no matter what.
Yeah.
And I've seen some people like starting to include Cheryl. I've seen Cheryl a couple times now, which would be good against Reggie's, but is also like just like another of those cards that the deck can just kind of play and like turn around, especially the Sablezard matchup.
Yeah, Yoshi, who got top 4, did play the
Yeah,
the
that's what I saw.
Cheryl. So, yeah, I mean, I do think I don't I I'm not expecting it to be the most popular deck, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was again, to be honest. Just because I think
Yeah.
people really like it, and it is solid. And it's definitely, if you're trying to play something of the new format, it's much more affordable than Giratina. You just pretty much can take your Palkia deck, take out the Intellions. You've probably got a Luminian V and an Empoleon V in your bulk from several sets ago. And then you just get 6 new cards pretty much, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be in like what the top 4 again at the very least. Like I don't know, I guess like with how popular it was at Peoria, I can't see it leaving the top 4. And at Peoria, actually, like the top 4 besides Kirim were all pretty close. It was like 130, 116, 100. So it'll be in the 100 range, I think, for sure.
Can you check
With
the registration numbers for Salt Lake while we're sitting here talking?
yeah,
See
I'll
what
check
it's
it.
at. I know it was like at 900 plus, but yeah, I would not be surprised to see Kyurem be the most played deck again. And while you're looking it up, we can also just talk about another VMAX deck, Mew VMAX. Did pretty decently in Peoria. No top 8 finishes. But Riley was on a couple win and ins, lost 2 win and ins in a row, which is definitely a big bummer for him. But yeah, I mean, Mew was pretty solid, and Mew was also pretty well respected. There was plenty of people running around with Drapions in their deck.
Yeah.
So I guess the discussion here shouldn't only be about how popular would you expect Mew to be, but how popular do you expect counters to be? Like, are Drapions still going to be in decks? Should Palkia be playing a Drapion like Cal was? Should the Lost Box decks be playing a Drapion? Kind of where do you feel like, in your opinion, these things fall?
So for Salt Lake, I did look it up. We got 975.
Okay.
Which this is like one of the harder regionals to get to. Besides, like, like I don't know. Everyone talks about Salt Lake as being one of the most expensive regionals.
Anywhere from
Are
the
the
East
West?
Coast is very expensive to fly to Salt Lake.
Yeah, but is the West Coast more expensive? Because I don't hear people talk about how hard it is to get to the California regionals, but everyone mentions Salt Lake being like a really expensive regional to get to. We've broken the numbers for last year's Salt Lake or last season's. It's still this year. Salt Lake City Regional. 2 Salt Lake City regionals in the same year. What the heck? But yeah, 975. So we broke that number. More people,
It was like
right?
600 and 600 something. I can find it real
Yeah.
quick on the list.
But yeah, I was just curious. Like, this is like one of the harder ones to people because I'm trying to like think about like projected numbers for future regionals. If this is one of the hardest ones to get to, and we've already surpassed its numbers,
627 for last
in the
season.
same year.
Yeah.
So we have 300 more people showing up to this theoretically. What are is every regional besides maybe the West Coast regional is going to have like 1,000+ players?
I
Be
don't know.
sick.
I mean, I think there's just a lot of people very interested in playing Pokemon right now, which is super cool to see. I think rotation, a lot more people will be interested. And then also, like, as League Cups and League Challenges come back, that's just going to get more eyes on competitive Pokemon. Like, people who are playing in, their local areas, League Cups and League Challenges, they're going to find out, oh, there's a regionals 2 hours away in a couple months. I'm going to start preparing for that, people who, like, wouldn't have any idea of it otherwise. So I think there's definitely great opportunity for there to be big growth in the game this season. I just hope that it can be maintained by having enough event space, especially once VG comes back. I'm very worried about what's going to happen when VG comes back because there are going to be 500 people at those regionals. And I mean, imagine if you tried to, in Peoria, cram 500 more people in that room. It would have been
Or
pretty tight.
Baltimore.
Yeah. Or Baltimore. Yeah. Baltimore would have been
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, so hopefully we're not going to lose. Like, of course, I want the VG players to get their seats as well, but hopefully we don't lose seats for TCG as
Just
well.
make
Like,
enough
we
for
want to
everyone,
have.
man.
Yeah, that's what we want. Big enough for everyone. Hopefully it can happen. But yeah, that is definitely a thought for sure. Is like what's going to happen with that. But yeah, Mew VMAX.
Yes.
This is one of the weird. This is like it's almost like Giratina promo. We're like reliving Giratina promo. Not quite as hard of a counter as Giratina promo was to Greninja Break, but because a lot of the Mew players seem to be like understand Drapion was probably going to be played to some extent. I think it was maybe played more than most people expected, because even the Mew players were playing Drapion.
Yeah.
So everyone came prepared to beat it. Everyone had their Roxanne path in their Mew list to be able to have like a aggressive comeback play against people who are rocking the Drapion. So It's one of those things where I don't think anyone's gonna, like, play chicken here. Like, I think the Drapions are gonna show up again, and it's not gonna be it's not really a game of chicken of, "Oh, should I play Mew? Because they're gonna cut their Drapions." And even past that, I don't think Mew is that good of a play even when the Drapions don't show up, because and if they do show up, you're just kinda screwed. So you're kinda screwed when they show up, but you're not actually in that good of a spot when they don't show up. So I feel like, thankfully, to be honest, like, I'm down for this. I feel like Mew is not in that good of a spot right now, and of course that might change before he gets rotated. But I'm fine with that. It not being a great play right now. And I feel like no one's gonna really be cutting their Drapions. So, and
Yeah.
we saw it was super successful at Peoria, right? It was in the Kyurem, one of the Kyurems in the top four, and then Cal played it as well in the Palkia, which is that's pretty devastating for Mew to deal with, like a Drapion in the Palkia deck.
So if you don't think Mew is a great play, do you still think people should respect it and bring the Drapions? Like, how badly do you think, for example, BDIF Palkia, how badly does someone need to play Drapion in their Palkia deck?
So Palkia, I'm not a huge fan of it in probably for Salt Lake City, because I think the play of Mew will drop. But I think I would probably play it if I played something like Kyurem. I'd probably rock it in
I mean,
something
I
like a
still think
Kyurem
Mew's going to
still.
definitely be a top 5 most popular deck,
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
easily.
Yeah, I think it will be in the top 5 most played decks. I think we won't see, like there was, Riley, Mahone, that whole crew. I don't think we're going to see a crew like that roll up with Mew, though, and kind of boost its success. It's a bunch of great players
Yeah.
bringing a good deck. That's going to influence the results, right, of any deck, right? So I don't think we're going to see something like that happen. So it'll be just because of something like that, not a group like that, not playing the deck, that will make it less demanding to play. If your goal is to, place well, top 32, top 16, try and break into a top 8, less necessary to bring in Drapion, for sure, I think. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it like works so well in the Palkia deck too, because you can like keep calling turn 1, bench no Palkias, don't bench a Drapion, and then they attack, and then you just go Drapion, bench a Palkia, and the game is basically over against Mew. So it's so clean in Palkia and Teleon. So if you're really just trying to lock up that matchup, I would say go for it. Like, yeah, I still think Mew will be in the top, 4 to 5 most popular decks. It'll be probably in the 100 range, right? It'll be around 100 probably
I
Mew
wonder
players
if
still, but
Cal ever like
success won't be there.
I wonder if Cal, or I guess anyone in Cut who had Drapion plus Choice Belt in their deck, I wonder if any of them knocked out a Palkia V with Drapion through the weekend. You
I
know?
doubt. I mean, that's actually not that hard,
No,
I
you
guess,
just
if
need,
you're,
if they have 3 Sobbles in play, you need 1 Energy Choice Belt on turn 2.
yeah, double cross switcher, or even if it's just the active.
Yeah.
Is there any other decks you can do that against? Another reason to go to
Anything.
70 HP Sobbles. They're not Rapid
Yeah,
Strike.
yeah. And I do think that 60 HP Sobbles are the play. I mean, Tor didn't play Echoing Horn in his list. I did talk to him a little bit backstage after he won, when he was like getting his stuff and like congratulated him and stuff. He did talk about how he wished he had an Echoing Horn like most of the weekend. So he said there was like a couple times where he was like, if I just played Echoing Horn, I would win the game right here. But he didn't have it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if people are copying towards lists though and not playing Echoing Horn, I think there's pretty much no reason not to just stick to, in Palkia specifically, 60 HP Sobbles. I think if you wanted to play like an Arceus Intellion deck or maybe some other Intellion engine deck, you could go with the 70 HP ones, but
Yeah. Well, Chip just leaked. You add the horn. Add the horn. Chip is leaked. You got to add the horn. Apparently, that's the play. Of course, Tor did still win the event, but had to come
yes,
from
yes.
the 6-2-1 bracket. So that's like the long haul. Any loss after that point, would have been bad. Had the horn, maybe coming at 7-1-1, 8-0-1, who knows, right? So
Yep.
the horn could have been the difference maker to make it a little bit easier of a run for Tord. So yeah, it sounds like you should add the horn. I mean, the horn's so good in the deck. Like, I mean, you can't go wrong with it. I feel like
Yeah.
it's such a powerful tool. But what was I gonna say? I forgot. Go ahead.
Well, moving on to
I
the
had a
next
thought.
deck.
I had
Yeah.
a thought.
We were talking about like the Sobble HP and Palkia and stuff, but
Oh yeah,
well,
Palkia is still really good. BDIF. Mew.
that's what
Okay.
your thought was.
Yeah, Mew doesn't seem like a great play. And then like I Drapion I would maybe play in Palkia, but I think I'd play it in anything else like the Kyurems. And if I played Mew, I'd probably also just bring the Drapion, so the matchup isn't such a coin flip as well.
So Drapion still seems good according to
Yeah.
Azul.
Yeah.
Okay, the kind of surprise in top eight, I would say, definitely the Hisuian Zoark VSTAR. Yeah, I mean it was pretty popular as well. Like for a deck that I don't think many people expected. There's one in top 8, one in top 16, and there was quite a few other ones in day 2. Where do you think Zoark stands? Should people play it? Should they stay away from it? should people worry about the matchup? Is there anything you can even do to tech for the matchup? Um, and also, should Zoroark players put Dunsparce in their deck to prep for Regigigas?
Um, so Zork, I think is what I said since it came out. I think it is literally if the format was just two prize Pokemon, I think Zork might be the best deck in format. But when you have to deal with the Regis and the Lost Gates and the Lost Boxes, it definitely comes down quite a bit. And I feel like the only way Zork can consistently stand up to the the decks like the Palkias and the Kirums is being consistent, like ruthlessly consistent. Because I think you need to get that first turn, that turn two prize, three prize knockout, whatever it might be. Like you need that KO. And that's definitely what we saw from the top 16 list. It actually had like the Mew build and it had like it's just like straight consistency, right? The other build was a little bit more teched out for the Lost Box matchup. Probably they didn't utilize that too much because there was not that much Lost Box at Peoria, but it got them all the way to top 8. So the deck can definitely get there. And I think we see that from Peoria. But I don't know. I would have to. I haven't played enough with the deck more recently to like know if I feel like even at its max consistency, are you consistently beating the Kirums, the Mews, the Palkia, and Teleons? If you are, I think the deck is a good play, and I would just be like, just hope to dodge the one prize stuff. You could put in the Dunsparce for the Reggie, I guess. I mean, I don't think Reggie's going to be a super popular deck. But yeah, if you want to play something for that, and then also I guess you're hoping to
All right,
dodge the
Azul's
Miltanks and
playing
the
Regis
Blissey,
again,
right?
everyone. He just leaked it.
Yeah, it's not going to be a super popular play, but yeah, you could play the Dunsparce for the Regis, and then you're gonna have to take the L to like I would tech this deck out very little because I think its strength is its consistency when you hit those two prize
Very
matchups.
fair,
So
yeah.
Dunsparce I think is okay, but I wouldn't like tech for Miltank or anything. Like don't have like double psychic energy or like some cheesy stuff to try and deal with Blissey Miltank. Like take the L, be consistent, beat your two prize matchups. And then maybe cheese out a win against a Reggie if you play the Dunsparce or something. But I think the deck, yeah, if you hit your right matchup, this is basically like dodge the one prize decks, the deck
Yeah,
with
I
that
do
gamble.
think like there will probably be some decks running around with Miltanks here and there, so it would maybe scare me a little bit to not have some sort of answer.
One of Miltank's to beat the Goodra.
The Gudra. I mean, I
Yeah.
think like, I mean, Miltank is very good against Gudra. It's very good against Zoroark, which while they're not two very popular decks, they are two decks that make up together a reasonable percentage, right? So if it's like a one card slot that's going to improve your matchup, in a
Now
deck
keep in
that can
mind,
utilize it, obviously, but
with Miltank against Goodra, you do have to be decking out second. Like
yes,
if they are winning the deck out, you don't just win. You can't just put Miltank in play and be like, "I've done it," because eventually they can attack with the Gudra, and then Miltank does 0 damage. So unless you're setting up some Exodia behind your Miltank, they'll still win the game on deck out, right?
yeah.
And you're not gonna be able to get a tie out of like that game will finish. Like game one will always finish, especially because the Miltank deck that you're usually playing it in like the Lost Gates and the Lost Boxes, you play like what one maybe two Marnie, so you will deck out. So you have to make sure you're decking out first. Open your VIP pass or whatever. Otherwise, if you have to like dig with Colress to find the Miltank, it's a little bit sketchier, I think for sure.
But I do think Zoroark is solid. I do like the lists with I like the Sharon's Cares as anti Lost Box stuff. I think that the Big Parasol is also okay for the anti Lost Box stuff. So yeah, I think Zoroark is very okay. I was really high on the deck when it first got announced. We've talked about it a few times, but yeah, it's I think an okay play. I don't think it'll be super popular. Probably like sixth, seventh most played deck that range, but there will be definitely people who bring it. And then we'll move on to the deck that you played, Azul, last weekend in
Reggie.
Peoria was the Regis. And maybe the big question is, should people respect the Regis? Because I think that is part of why Reggie saw a lot of success and did end up getting played pretty heavily, is that people were not respecting it. There was not very many tech cards. People were not playing the jammers in their Palkia decks. They were not playing Avery in their Mew decks anymore. Dunsparce was absent from Arceus decks and a lot of Zoroark decks. But is there reason for people to slot these cards back in? Just kind of what are your thoughts, I guess, on that?
I mean, it's definitely a deck that I think is still solid for sure. And it's kind of weird because Gift Energy is currently not usable on PTCGO. We haven't seen how like people react to, oh, Reggie's kind of good right now, how many people would actually play it? Because nobody's playing it because gift energy is so good for the deck and you can't use it on PTCGO. So in these online tournaments, no one's playing Reggie because gift energy is broken right now,
Yeah.
right? So we don't even know like what the general player base even thinks about Reggie as a deck because we haven't been able to see it reflect in online tournaments, right? Like leading up to Peoria, no one was playing Reggie in online tournaments, had a terrible win rate, obviously showed that it's a contender at Peoria, but now we don't even know how people feel about that, right? So I think the deck is still very solid. I would say Dunsparce and Zorak and stuff like that, probably go for it. If you're still playing Arceus and Teleon for some reason, you should probably play a Dunsparce. I would say get a different deck first, but if you can't do that, probably want to play the Dunsparce. It was definitely very nice when I played up against Mew and they never played an Avery against me because everyone cut it, but I don't think that really changes the matchup too much, so I don't think I'm going to make my Mew deck worse when that's such a bad matchup to begin with. So it depends on the deck, but yeah, I think like stuff like Dunsparce should be if you're locked in on a Zorak deck, and for some reason can't let go of Arceus and Teleon, yeah, play the Sparse for sure. But or play the Sparse if you want to tech for it. But yeah, it's not going to be like a a top 5 deck. It'll be somewhere with Zorak in 7-8 popularity slot, right?
Yeah, I do think that if I was playing Palkia at the tournament, I would probably play Jammer. It's a
Bring
one
the
card
jammy deck.
inclusion that I think that you have enough tricks in the deck to beat the matchup, or at least make it like 50-50, slightly favored, 55-45, something like that, if you add in the Jammer. If
And Jammer's
you...
just kind of good right now because of air balloons, to be honest.
That's
Like
true
on all
too.
these Lost Zone decks, like Jammer's good against those as well because they're not KOing that Palkia anytime soon.
And as Palkia, there's a lot of really cute plays you can do to get around, like to try to get back in the game versus Reggie's. Like whenever you can Roxanne, if you on the turn you play Roxanne, go cross switcher the Regidrago and not hit into the gift energy. Leave the gift energy so you don't give them extra draw. So cross switcher plus Roxanne. I think if you can pull off that play, that's very strong. And throw the Jammer on there as well. It's just going to be solid. And yeah, like you said, it's just like a decent card right now. Like even in the mirror, turning off choice belts to make your Palkia survive an extra turn, potentially very solid.
Yeah, it's not a bad card. It's definitely a card that's become out of favor because it's not. I think it was always people's card to cut after playing Palkia. They were like, Jammer was okay.
Yeah.
And that's always been my like first cut in Palkia as well from back for testing for like Milwaukee and NAIC. It's like Jammer's like the okay card for sure. But if there's enough good matchups for it, and I think Reggie's air balloons, there's definitely reason to play it if you can find it. But like it's gonna be hard to fit the Jammer, the canceling Cologne for the Sablezard matchup, and then you also have to think about Drapion if you want to run the Drapion as well. You don't want to clunk up your deck too much.
Yeah.
Like otherwise you're just losing to yourself at that point.
So then we get to the Arceus decks. And to be honest, it really feels like there's one that's really pushed itself to the forefront, and that is Arceus Gudra is kind of
Yeah.
the big deck that everyone is playing. People were talking about, obviously. It did pretty well in Peoria, was on the winning end, lost the winning, or tied the winning end, I should say, to get out of top 8. But it's done pretty well in online tournaments. A lot of people have been playing it. There's also still the Mirage Gate version of Gudra. So before we talk about all the other Arceus decks, which I guess there's not really that many, but before we talk about other Arceus decks, Arceus Gudra is definitely quite different of an approach to play the game, similar to how Arceus Drowdon always was. Very different from the other Arceus decks. How do you feel about it, Azul? Damage reduction, pretty good, it turns out.
Yeah, and that was like my initial impressions about it as well. But the more I've actually played the deck and seen it play, I actually think you just have a bad Palkia and Teleon matchup. Like I think that matchup is actually just not that good. So besides that, you're good against most of the Lost Zone decks. Tina kind of comes down to if you find your Parasol and when do they find their Vacuum. Because like Escape Rope is actually really good in that matchup, as like really bad for Gudra as well. Because you like if you bench another 2 prize Pokemon, they just Escape Rope it up and knock it out, right? So it's like you not bench something, but then you get one hit KO'd by Giratina's VSTAR attack. So yeah, I was like a big fan of it initially, but the more I played more of the heavy hitting matchups, also the Mew matchup is unfavorable as well. So the more I played more of the heavy hitting matchups, the less and less of a fan I become of Gudra. I think it's just Arceus Duraludon all over again. Like if anyone has listened to me rant about Arceus Duraludon before, I just don't think Arceus Duraludon is a very good deck. I think Gudra is just Arceus Duraludon 2.0. It's cooler, a little bit better,
Stickier.
it's stickier, but it's just not that good. Like it looks like it should be good, and the theorizing of the matchups, but when you actually play the deck, the matchups just don't break down well enough. I feel like overall. So yeah, I'm not a big unless like the format fully flips or the meta fully flips to like Lost Zone one prize decks. That's where I think it could shine. Um, and or if you come up with some other cute ways to deal with some of these heavier hitting decks, I guess as well. But yeah, like Kirim as well, right? Your KO. They can do that once, maybe twice, and just want to KO your Gudra. So it just kind of struggles against the heavy hitters. There's too many of them.
So we've talked about how Palkia is kind of the dominant deck of the format. It feels like, the obvious best deck,
Yeah.
tier one, the deck that you want to be prepared against or whatever if you're going into the tournament. So why is it that the deck that people went to counter Palkia when it was the most played deck, Arceus Flying Pikachu, right? You won an AIC with it. It won the World Championships. Why is it now that Arceus Flying Pikachu does not make sense as a good play?
Is yeah, so I mentioned like a little bit earlier, just the meta's too open. Like and like I said, maybe it's like a lot of things. It feels weird because it feels weird. It feels like the meta maybe should be, and maybe it's where we'll get to, not by Salt Lake City, I don't think, but maybe by Lily, or Lille or Warsaw. Is it Warsaw? It's Warsaw,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Maybe by those tournaments, maybe we'll get back to the 30% Palkia and Teleon meta because unless someone comes up with like a new broken deck that has to be respected, but it feels like it's almost like just kind of an ignorance or just unwilling to want to believe that Palkia and Teleon is still a BDIF, which is leading to more people playing decks that they think are a better play, and then leading to a situation where you can't actually counter Palkia and Teleon because the meta is too wide open, right? So that's my feelings about the meta currently. Anyways, like I think Palkia and Teleon just is the BDIF. I don't think as many people are playing it as they should because it is the BDIF, which leads to it being impossible to counter it because the meta is too wide open. Like you can't play Arceus Flying Pikachu. There's too many bad matchups right now. Too many things you have to account for, and you can't account for all of them and then still be a consistent deck that takes down Palkia and Teleon.
yeah.
So it's like becomes like an unplayable deck in that sense.
So what it seems like a lot of people have done that have played Arceus Pikachu in online events is that the partner has become Arceus Pikachu plus Giratina, right?
Yeah,
So where it's like it's not a thing that is good for a specific matchup. It's just a thing that is good, right? It's just
yeah.
a Pokemon that has a lot of HP, does a lot of damage. If you wanted to play Arceus Flying Pikachu, is that probably the best answer? I think something that was a little talked about leading into the event, and some people did play. I think Eric Smith was in day 2 with Arceus Flying Pikachu with Espeon VMAX as like an answer to the Lost Box. Like, is there any merit to a strategy like that? Also, Riley Wren was in day 2 with Arceus Flying Pikachu with double Drapion for the Mew matchup. They got 33rd place. I think Eric was also top. They were also in the top 64 or something like that. So,
Yeah.
I don't know any merit to anything like that.
I think they're all cute answers, but they don't answer enough of the format. And like I said, like I feel like Flying Pikachu up against Palkia it was favorable, but a lot of that was on how consistent the deck was with like the build that I brought, or if you look at the build that Andre brought. So as soon as you add stuff like the Espeon, the Giratina, any of this other stuff that like starts to hurt your consistency, which I feel like hurts the matchup a lot. Like the overwhelming power of the deck in the matchup through its consistency is what I feel like really gave you the edge, and kept you ahead in the matchup, like when
Otherwise, it
Palkia
just
and
starts to feel
Teleon.
like a clunky mess.
Yeah, and then once you start whiffing, when you're relying on Palkia like whiffing one of the 3 games or a little bit in another game, then all of a sudden it gets evened up and it gets closer to 50-50 or even starts to become favored for Palkia and Teleon at that point. So,
Yeah.
And then you're also like you're not just beating everything else as Arceus Flying Pikachu as well with these techs. Like the Espeon's cool, but now Sablezard is playing 4 path. Can Espeon still be good? I don't know. Arceus Giratina, like just without the Flying Pikachu, I think when you add both of them, it's just a bad deck. But if you do it with just the Giratina, I think that might become the new best way to actually play Arceus. I think there was 2 of them. It was actually a pretty popular deck too. Yeah, Arceus, B-Barrel, Giratina. Like it's the new best way to play Giratina. There's a couple in day 2, and it was like in the top 10 most popular decks.
It
That's like a
was.
pretty big
It
number.
was
Like
the
6,
seventh.
7, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
seventh.
I was actually surprised when I saw that number, but yeah, there's a couple in day 2 who made day 2 at Peoria, and yeah, I think that might be the new best way to play Arceus. B-Barrel is just to have it with Giratina. Can do some cool stuff in there. Like Arceus can handle a lot of the Lost Zone boxes by itself, and then you have the backup of the Giratina to kind of deal with any of the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Your Palkia matchup is worse though for sure. So, but when you tech it out, when you tech out just the Flying Pikachu build, your Arceus, your Palkia matchup maybe is better, but everything, all your other matchups suffer, which makes it just kind of like a deck that can't stand up in the format. I feel like.
Yeah, I'm looking at Craig Eoff's list here, which I haven't actually taken any time to look at this yet, but this seems pretty solid. Just 4-2 Arceus V-Star. Probably would play 4-3, but then 2-2 Giratina. And it also has like the Radiant Halucha in here. So Giratina can one-hit KO Mew VMAX and Kyurem VMAX, right? So,
Yeah,
oh,
with
wait,
the
no.
choice spell, you can get to. He's got choice spell in
Yeah,
there
yeah,
as
yeah.
well, so you
Choice
can get to
spells.
the
Yes.
Kyurem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like a more aggressive build of the Arceus Bebreal, and it has the Goon in there as well, so you can do the turn 2 Arceus V-Star 220 that
Yeah.
everyone hates having happen to them. So yeah, like
It's
something like
always
that,
been
I
one of
think
my
is
favorite
the
things to do with Arceus is just like 220 turn 2 because it's like so easy to find it because you've got Crobat to dig for it, you've got Beaverell to dig, and it's just
Starburst
so when
cleans it
you
up.
pull it off, you just get so far ahead as well in those matchups.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, you get really, especially when you have a backup attacker like Giratina and you're in like a
Yeah,
2 prize trade off, like you're looking pretty good from there for sure. Yeah, so I think that is like the best way to play the Arceus Bebreal deck from now on. I think like you just need something more versatile than what Flying Pikachu was when you don't have a couple simple tech cards that you can do to clean up your other matchups. It's like kind of like a big overhaul of the deck to try and make it work in the meta, which just makes it a bad deck. But this is the Tina way is the way I think.
and then lastly, we'll talk about others. So the other 3 decks that made day 2 in Peoria, if we feel like they've got any legs heading into Salt Lake City, and those are Blissey, Dialga, and Shadow Rider. Now, there's only one each of the Dialga and the Shadow Rider. Oh, my monitor just cut off. Okay, there we go. One each of the Dialga and the Shadow Rider in day 2, but a decent amount of Blissey. And Blissey has been seeing a bit more play in online tournaments. And I honestly think in large part it's due to playing 3 Miltank, and Miltank being pretty solid against a handful of decks.
Yeah, a couple of reasons. Yeah, I think Blissey in general is just the healing. There's no
Yeah.
real deck that heals as consistently as Blissey does, which is really good against any of the Lost Gate or the Sablezard deck. And then yeah, Miltank's pretty good as well. Miltank's pretty good. And then Marnie Path. It's got Marnie Path. It's got Miltank. It heals. Yeah, overall, I think Blissey's actually pretty good. I'm actually kind of a Blissey fan for sure. Definitely a fan of Blissey. I think it's just got a good matchup spread for what's going on in the format right now. It can kind of handle most things, and it's got a decent, close, but I'd say slightly favorable up against the Palkia and Teleon. So you can't go wrong with that.
And as far as Dialga and Shadow Rider, I think my thoughts on those 2 decks would just be like they're like very okay. And like you could play them and make day 2 and maybe squeak into top 8, but I think there's just better and more consistent decks to choose if you're really someone who's like trying to compete to make top 8. Now, if you're a big fan of Dialga, Shadow Rider, like decks like this, I do think that they're like fine. And you could still like have reasonable success at the tournament if you chose to play them. As we see in Peoria, there was one of each of those in day 2.
Yeah, I feel like Shadow Rider's working. There's some cute things you can do with the Shadow Rider because this one I think it had the Espeon in there as well, right?
Yeah.
You got the Espeon, which I feel like is like more so of an annoyance for Giratina than it is for um uh than it is for the Lost Box, to be
Yeah.
honest, especially now that they have the path. So that's kind of cool. And then you have stuff like if you go up against Mew, you've got that Shadow Mist, and they do play a fan of waves, so you can like shadow like even
Cheese
if
a
Mew
win
goes
against
first,
Mew.
yeah,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
if Mew goes first and they attach an energy, you can go like, all right, turn 1 Calyrex, hopefully open it, Shadow Mist, and they go knock it out, and then you go Starbirth, attach, get the fan of waves off the Starbirth, fan of waves, Shadow Mist, and then the game's just over.
Yeah.
So you can get really cheesy
I think I would also
against Mew with
play
that.
Collapsed Stadium as well in Shadow Rider if
You
you wanted
cheese
to.
Reggie.
Yeah, so you just auto win Reggie as well. I mean, and also it's like a good card in the deck. You can heal your VMAX and like just discard it from play, or you're gonna use
Yeah.
Lumineon or Crobat to set up. Just get him out of play. Like I think Collapse Stadium is just good, and against Reggies, you just go attach Collapse Stadium. The game is over.
Yeah. I mean, let's say
There's
the only thing that
literally
would,
nothing they can do.
yeah, if they have a setup Reggie, even you could just once again fan of waves, remove that energy from the Reggie, and that Reggie can't attack anymore, anyways. Yeah, so you could get maybe there's 2 skater parks in here. You could probably cut one of those for a Collapse Stadium
Yeah, Skate
and just
Park's
auto
like
win
very
Reggie.
meh, I feel like in that deck.
Skaters Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually yeah. So there's a lot of cute things you can do, but once again, I feel like it just gets. I don't think this deck is beating Palkia like
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
I do not think this deck is ever beating
Yeah,
Palkia.
and Andrew, who made day 2, got destroyed by his brother Zach on stream playing Kyurem. And like Kyurem just does too much too quickly, and Shadow
Yeah.
Rider needs time to get energies in play. So
Yeah, you have yeah, the sustained damage in the late game, but you don't get to the late game before it's already over. So
yeah, that's
yeah,
the
it's
problem.
cool. It's a cool deck. Got some cool matchups, but once again, the meta is so wide. These cool decks can't thrive because the meta is just so wide, right? Which was once again kind of like the almost like annoyance of the meta being so wide, but so unruly because everything is just mediocre,
Yeah.
right? Like everything is mediocre, so nothing's good, nothing's bad. But you can't like hard counter the meta. You can't even try and counter the meta with anything cool.
And then last thing we'll talk about, is there any older deck that you think has a chance to make a comeback? Anything like, I mean, one that comes to my mind almost always is like Rapid Strike Urshifu, especially with Mirage Gate. I know people have been trying that out a little bit. Leafy on VMAX. I've seen some people talking about on Twitter, Mew is very low in play now. You also could play Drapion as an answer if you wanted to. Is there room for anything like that, or something else that like used to be a pretty played deck that's not played anymore? Jolteon, VMAX, anything like that?
Oh, not that I can think of. I'm sure people are going to try and force their Arc Intel. That's like the one that always comes up for me. I'm sure there's going to be people out there who force Arc Intel, but yeah, there's nothing that I can really think of that seems like it has a chance to make a comeback. Because once again, the meta's so wide. You got to be playing it. I guess Blissy's kind of making its comeback, right? Like Blissey has made its comeback. Blissy's here.
Sure.
Looks like it's probably here to stay. I think it does have, like I said, it's got a pretty good matchup spread. There's no reason for it to leave the meta because the meta probably won't get narrow enough to kind of push Blissey out where it's like, oh, you can't compete with the top two decks anymore. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe something like a Blissey could make a rise again, but I couldn't come up with anything, to be honest.
All right. Well, I think that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thanks to everyone for tuning in as always. And if you did enjoy, please do us a favor, leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. It only takes a second and it does so much to help us and help more people find the podcast. Also, please feel free to check out the YouTube channel. And if you are watching here on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, all that good YouTube stuff. One more time as we're closing the episode out, we want to just throw our thoughts towards Tiger Hickman, Mark Lafferty, and Drake Lemansky, and would encourage anyone who has the means, please try to support these guys, and let's just show them the tight-knit community that the Pokemon community can be, and show your support if you are able to do so. Thanks everyone for listening. Be sure to check us out as well on social media. Best way to interact is on Twitter. You can follow myself at Trainer Chip Richie. Azul is at Azul_GG. And the podcast is at Uncommon_Energy. Azul, anything else to add?
I appreciate the support as always. We'll catch you guys next week, next Tuesday, 7 a.m. Eastern. Good luck if you're headed to Salt Lake City. Peace.